The summer of 1939 brought the world to the edge of a new and uncertain conflict. While Europe watched the ominous signs of war unfolding with the German invasion of Poland on the horizon, a different clash was brewing in the vast, windswept steppes of Mongolia. Here, along the banks of the Khalkhin Gol River, two great powers of East Asia and the Soviet Union were preparing for a confrontation that would test their military skill, leadership, and resolve. It was a remote place, seemingly insignificant on the world map, yet it would become the stage for one of the most intense and meticulously fought battles of the late interwar period. Japan, eager to consolidate its territorial gains in Manchuria and expand its influence over East Asia, had increasingly set its sights on the resource-rich lands of Mongolia and northern China. Its Kwantung Army, seasoned from years of campaigns in Manchuria and China, was confident in its capabilities, though often operating with a degree of autonomy that sometimes bordered on recklessness. On the other side of the river, the Soviet Union, wary of Japanese ambitions and determined to protect its eastern frontier, had fortified the region with experienced troops, modern equipment, and careful planning. What began as a minor border dispute rapidly evolved into a full-scale confrontation as small skirmishes escalated and tensions reached a breaking point. Both sides brought to the battlefield not only men and machines, but also the weight of national pride and strategic necessity. Japanese commanders believed that a decisive victory in Mongolia would secure their northern flank and demonstrate their military prowess. Soviet leaders, aware of the importance of a stable eastern border and determined to check Japanese expansionism, viewed the conflict as an opportunity to test their modernized forces and assert control over contested territory. The clash would combine conventional infantry engagements, mechanized assaults, artillery bombardments, and aerial reconnaissance, setting the stage for a modern, large-scale battle. The landscape itself would play a silent but formidable role. The open plains and riverbanks offered little natural cover, favoring maneuver warfare and artillery duels. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles of harsh terrain, challenging logistics and endurance. Both armies would be forced to adapt to these conditions, with decisions in strategy and tactics shaping the flow of the conflict. In the months that followed, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol would see intense fighting, brilliant maneuvers, and costly miscalculations, ultimately leaving a lasting imprint on both Japanese and Soviet military doctrine. The story of Khalkhin Gol is more than just a tale of combat. It is a narrative of leadership under pressure, of soldiers enduring extreme conditions, and of nations navigating the complex interplay of ambition, fear, and pragmatism. From the first exchanges of fire to the decisive counteroffensives, this battle would reveal the limits of planning, the consequences of underestimating the enemy, and the ways in which terrain and timing can shape the outcome of war. As we explore the events that unfolded along the Khalkhin Gol, we will witness the bravery, mistakes, and strategic thinking that defined this remarkable yet often overlooked confrontation of 1939. The late 1930s were a period of mounting tension and shifting alliances in East Asia. Japan, emboldened by its victory in the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and the establishment of the puppet state of Manchukuo, was increasingly assertive in its foreign policy. The Japanese military saw opportunities in Mongolia, a sparsely populated territory under the nominal control of the Soviet-aligned government of the Mongolian People's Republic. Japanese leaders believed that asserting control over this region could secure their northern border, provide a buffer zone against Soviet influence, and enhance access to strategic resources. For the Kwantung Army stationed in Manchuria, these objectives became a justification for aggressive patrols and incursions along the contested border areas. On the Soviet side, the eastern frontier was considered vital for national security. The Soviet Union, still recovering and consolidating from the purges and industrialization efforts of the 1930s, was acutely aware of Japan's expansionist tendencies. Soviet planners fortified positions along the border, deployed mechanized and infantry units, and established supply lines capable of sustaining prolonged engagements. The Red Army had also modernized its approach to warfare, incorporating combined arms tactics, armor, and artillery coordination to strengthen its defensive and offensive capabilities. Intelligence gathering and reconnaissance were prioritized to monitor Japanese movements and preempt potential attacks. Tensions along the Khalkhin Gol River, a small tributary in eastern Mongolia, escalated rapidly due to both sides' miscalculations and misunderstandings. Japanese patrols crossed into disputed territory, seeking to assert dominance and provoke a response that could justify further operations. Soviet forces responded with force, reinforcing positions and engaging intruding units. Small clashes, initially limited in scale, quickly intensified as reinforcements arrived and skirmishes turned into coordinated attacks. These early encounters revealed the strengths and weaknesses of both armies. The Japanese demonstrated tactical skill and aggression but underestimated the logistical challenges and the readiness of Soviet defenses. The Soviets, while initially caught off guard, utilized superior artillery, armored support, and coordinated infantry movements to maintain control over key positions. Political motivations further fueled the escalation. Japan's leadership saw success at Khalkhin Gol as a means to demonstrate the effectiveness of their military strategy and to influence broader territorial ambitions. The Soviet government, understanding the symbolic and strategic importance of defending its eastern borders, was determined not to appear weak in the face of Japanese provocations. Both sides sought to project strength while preparing for the possibility of extended conflict. The terrain and climate of the region added complexity to the unfolding situation. The open steppe offered few natural defenses, forcing commanders to rely on fortifications, tactical maneuvering, and mobility. Supply lines were stretched over long distances, creating logistical challenges that would influence troop movements and battle plans. Harsh weather conditions, including scorching summer heat and sudden storms, further tested the endurance of soldiers on both sides. By the summer of 1939, what began as a minor territorial dispute had escalated into a significant military confrontation. The stage was set for a clash that would involve tens of thousands of troops, hundreds of armored vehicles, and extensive artillery and air support. The battles of Khalkhin Gol would not only test the skill and resilience of the Japanese and Soviet forces, but would also leave a lasting impact on military strategy, leadership, and international relations in East Asia. The initial skirmishes along the Khalkhin Gol River began in late May 1939, as Japanese and Soviet Mongolian forces probed each other's positions. What started as small patrol encounters quickly escalated into more organized clashes, revealing both the tactical strengths and weaknesses of the opposing armies. Japanese units, operating under the command of generals who were confident from previous campaigns in Manchuria, believed that a series of aggressive strikes could secure control over disputed territory. They relied on their superior training in infantry maneuvers and night attacks, often attempting to outflank Soviet positions. These early operations were marked by speed and daring, with Japanese troops moving swiftly across the open steppes, aiming to overwhelm smaller Soviet units before they could consolidate. On the Soviet side, commanders recognized the importance of holding their ground along the border. Forces under the emerging leadership of Georgy Zhukov, though initially limited in number, focused on fortifying positions, maintaining supply lines, and gathering intelligence on Japanese movements. Reconnaissance became a critical component, with Soviet patrols carefully mapping terrain and observing Japanese activity. Early clashes demonstrated that Soviet troops, while sometimes outmaneuvered in open assaults, possessed significant advantages in artillery and coordinated defensive tactics. Mortar and artillery fire often disrupted Japanese advances, forcing them to reassess their approach and exposing the limitations of frontal assaults across the exposed steppe. NNTHE opening engagements also highlighted the challenges of terrain and logistics. The Khalkhin Gol region was composed of dry riverbeds, open plains, and sparse vegetation, providing little cover for advancing forces. Japanese troops, moving quickly across these open areas, were vulnerable to Soviet observation and fire. Soviet units, while better positioned for defensive operations, faced difficulties in resupplying forward positions due to the vast distances involved and the harshness of the summer environment. Heat and dust took a toll on soldiers and equipment alike, slowing the pace of operations and testing the endurance of both armies. During June 1939, the fighting intensified as both sides reinforced their positions. The Japanese brought in additional infantry units and light artillery, hoping to exploit perceived weaknesses in the Soviet lines. They conducted reconnaissance in force, probing Soviet defenses and attempting small-scale attacks to draw responses. Soviet commanders, anticipating these moves, implemented countermeasures that included well-placed machine gun nests, prepared artillery barrages, and mobile reserves capable of responding to Japanese advances. These skirmishes, though limited in scale, began to reveal patterns of combat and the tactical tendencies of each side. Leadership during these early clashes proved decisive. Japanese commanders emphasized bold, rapid maneuvers and aggressive engagement, often risking exposure to artillery and counterattacks. Soviet leaders, including Zhukov, demonstrated flexibility and coordination, integrating infantry, artillery, and limited armored support to counter Japanese tactics. The contrast between Japanese offensive initiative and Soviet disciplined defense set the stage for larger confrontations. Commanders on both sides learned from these encounters, adjusting formations, supply arrangements, and engagement strategies in preparation for the inevitable escalation. These initial skirmishes also affected morale. Japanese soldiers, confident in their training and aggressiveness, initially viewed the engagements as manageable and expected to dominate smaller Soviet units. However, repeated exposure to well-coordinated artillery and counterattacks began to temper this confidence, introducing caution into their planning. Soviet troops, while sometimes forced into reactive positions, gained confidence from successfully repelling attacks and inflicting casualties, demonstrating that Japanese forces were not invincible. By late June, the clashes along Khalkhin Gol had escalated beyond mere border tensions. Both armies had committed significant resources, and the initial probing attacks had evolved into a series of continuous engagements. The Japanese realized that quick, decisive victories would not come easily, while Soviet commanders recognized the importance of preparing for larger operations. These early battles, though limited in scale, were critical in shaping the operational strategies that would dominate the coming months. They revealed the capabilities of both sides, tested leadership and logistics, and set the foundation for the intense and complex battles that would define the 1939 Khalkhin Gol campaign. By early July 1939, the conflict along the Khalkhin Gol River had moved beyond sporadic skirmishes into sustained operations, signaling a clear escalation of hostilities. Both the Japanese and Soviet Mongolian forces recognized that control over this disputed territory was not merely a matter of pride, but of strategic necessity. The Japanese Kwantung Army, confident in its previous successes in Manchuria, began implementing more elaborate plans designed to outflank and encircle Soviet positions. They relied on fast-moving infantry, supported by light artillery and cavalry units, attempting to exploit perceived weaknesses in Soviet deployment. The open plains of the steppe offered opportunities for maneuver, but also left troops exposed to artillery and counterattacks, highlighting the inherent risks of rapid offensive action. The Soviet command, under Georgy Zhukov, responded with a combination of defensive fortification and tactical adaptability. Recognizing that the Japanese favored bold frontal assaults and encirclement tactics, Zhukov ordered the construction of strong defensive positions along likely avenues of advance, integrating machine gun emplacements, artillery emplacements, and trenches to maximize firepower and resilience. Soviet units were instructed to hold firm and delay Japanese movements while awaiting reinforcements and additional armored support. Coordination between infantry, artillery, and reconnaissance became essential, with patrols constantly monitoring Japanese troop concentrations and reporting movements to higher command. Throughout July, the clashes intensified, with both sides committing increasingly larger formations to the battlefield. Japanese forces initiated a series of probing attacks, designed to test Soviet defenses and identify weak points. These engagements often involved rapid assaults by infantry columns, supported by mobile artillery, attempting to seize key terrain or disrupt supply lines. Soviet troops, however, demonstrated remarkable discipline in defense, using terrain to their advantage and carefully timing artillery strikes to disrupt Japanese advances. These confrontations, though localized, revealed the importance of logistics, communication, and timing in modern warfare. Reinforcements played a critical role in this period. The Japanese brought additional infantry brigades, engineers, and artillery batteries to bolster their offensive potential. Their objective was to achieve a decisive breakthrough by concentrating force against vulnerable Soviet positions, while maintaining the flexibility to respond to unexpected developments. The Soviets, anticipating this buildup, deployed armored units strategically to counter Japanese maneuvers. coordinating tank support with artillery barrages and infantry movements. The integration of armor, artillery, and infantry began to shape the operational dynamics of the battlefield, foreshadowing the more decisive engagements to come. Aerial reconnaissance and limited air support became increasingly important as both sides sought intelligence and tactical advantage. Japanese aircraft conducted scouting missions to identify Soviet concentrations and supply routes, while the Soviets deployed planes for observation, ground attack, and coordination of artillery fire. The contested airspace added a new dimension to the conflict, allowing commanders to adjust plans in near real time and highlighting the growing importance of air power even in regional conflicts. The escalation also revealed the human costs of sustained combat. Troops on both sides faced extreme heat, dust, and the constant threat of artillery and small arms fire. Supply lines were stretched to their limits, forcing commanders to carefully manage rations, ammunition, and medical support. Morale fluctuated, with Japanese soldiers initially confident but increasingly cautious as they encountered stubborn resistance, while Soviet troops gained confidence from successfully repelling attacks and maintaining cohesion under pressure. By mid-July, the stage was set for larger, more decisive engagements. Both the Japanese and Soviets had adapted to the conditions of the battlefield, tested the enemy's capabilities, and refined their strategies. The conflict was no longer a series of minor skirmishes. It had evolved into a fully fledged campaign characterized by coordinated operations, tactical innovation, and significant risk. The lessons learned during this phase about terrain, logistics, combined arms tactics, and leadership under pressure would shape the critical battles that defined the Khalkhin Gol campaign and ultimately determine the outcome of the confrontation. By late July 1939, the battles of Khalkhin Gol had entered a critical phase. The initial skirmishes and probing attacks had evolved into full-scale engagements, with both the Japanese and Soviet Mongolian forces committing tens of thousands of troops to decisive operations. Japanese commanders, confident in their superior training and aggressive tactics, sought to achieve a breakthrough by encircling Soviet positions along key sectors of the river. They relied on rapid infantry advances, supported by artillery, light tanks, and cavalry, attempting to exploit perceived gaps in the Soviet lines. However, the Soviets had learned from the early clashes, fortifying positions, deploying reserves strategically, and integrating artillery and mechanized units to counter Japanese maneuvers. The terrain played a decisive role in shaping the course of these battles. The open steppes offered opportunities for rapid maneuver, but also left attacking forces highly exposed to artillery and defensive fire. Japanese columns advancing across the plains were often met with coordinated Soviet barrages, halting momentum and inflicting heavy casualties. Soviet machine gun nests and trench positions created strong defensive pockets, forcing Japanese units to adapt their tactics or risk encirclement. The combination of terrain, artillery, and disciplined defensive positions began to slow the Japanese advance, demonstrating the importance of preparation and flexibility in modern combat. Several engagements during this period proved pivotal. Japanese attempts to outflank Soviet positions were met with well-timed counterattacks and concentrated firepower. On multiple occasions, Japanese forces penetrated initial lines, only to be trapped in kill zones created by Soviet artillery and infantry coordination. These encounters highlighted the growing sophistication of Soviet combined arms tactics, as infantry, armor, and artillery were employed in concert to maximize effectiveness. Meanwhile, Japanese units, while demonstrating remarkable bravery and cohesion, began to suffer from attrition and the limitations of extended supply lines. Commanders faced the constant challenge of maintaining offensive momentum while sustaining casualties and logistical pressure. Leadership decisions became increasingly decisive. Georgy Zhukov, recognizing the importance of controlling the initiative, directed reserves to threaten sectors, coordinated counteroffensives, and leveraged intelligence to anticipate Japanese maneuvers. Japanese commanders, while aggressive and bold, struggled to adapt to the evolving battlefield conditions and the Soviets' growing coordination. These differences in command flexibility began to influence outcomes on multiple fronts, with Soviet forces slowly gaining the upper hand in key sectors. Artillery and armored support played a crucial role in the pivotal battles of this phase. Soviet tanks, though fewer in number than the infantry, were deployed strategically to blunt Japanese attacks and exploit weaknesses during counterattacks. Artillery barrages disrupted Japanese formations, destroyed fortifications, and allowed infantry to reclaim contested ground. The Japanese, lacking sufficient armored support and often relying on frontal assaults, found themselves vulnerable to concentrated fire. Coordination between Soviet artillery observers, infantry units, and tanks created a synergy that steadily eroded Japanese offensive capacity. The human dimension of these battles was immense. Soldiers endured long marches across the steppe under extreme heat, faced constant artillery and small arms fire, and grappled with exhaustion and supply shortages. Morale fluctuated sharply. Japanese troops, initially confident, began to realize that victory would not come easily, while Soviet forces, buoyed by successful defensive actions and tactical ingenuity, gained confidence and cohesion. The fierce combat and high casualties underscored the intensity and significance of the conflict, leaving a profound impact on those who fought. By the end of July, the pattern of engagement had shifted decisively. Japanese attacks, though brave and skillful, were increasingly contained by Soviet defenses and countermeasures. The Soviets, leveraging terrain, coordination, and growing reinforcements, began to dictate the pace and direction of operations. The battles of this phase demonstrated the evolution of both armies, strategies, the importance of command flexibility, and the impact of modern combined arms tactics. The stage was now set for the Soviet counteroffensive, which would ultimately determine the outcome of the Khalkhin Gol campaign and reshape the strategic calculations of both nations in East Asia. In early August 1939, the Soviet forces under Georgy Zhukov launched a decisive counteroffensive along the Khalkhin Gol River, marking a turning point in the conflict. After weeks of defensive engagements, reconnaissance, and careful preparation, Zhukov had amassed sufficient forces to execute a coordinated assault designed to encircle and destroy the Japanese units entrenched along the river. The plan relied on simultaneous attacks from multiple directions, combining infantry, artillery, and armor to overwhelm the Japanese defenses. Detailed planning, precise timing, and strict discipline were essential to the operation, reflecting the Soviets' methodical approach to breaking the stalemate that had persisted throughout July. The counteroffensive began with concentrated artillery barrages aimed at Japanese positions, softening defenses and creating opportunities for infantry and mechanized units to advance. Soviet artillery, positioned strategically along ridges and concealed in trenches, unleashed devastating fire, targeting strongpoints, supply depots, and machine gun nests. These barrages disrupted Japanese formations and inflicted significant casualties, forcing many units to fall back or regroup under extreme pressure. Observers coordinated closely with forward units to adjust fire in real time, ensuring maximum effectiveness. This level of coordination demonstrated Zhukov's ability to integrate firepower and maneuver, a lesson that would influence later campaigns in the Soviet Union. Infantry assaults followed immediately behind the artillery, exploiting weakened positions and attempting to break through Japanese lines. Soviet soldiers advanced under cover, using terrain features for protection while maintaining relentless pressure. The coordination between infantry and tanks proved decisive, as armored units spearheaded attacks into gaps created by artillery bombardments. Japanese defenders, despite their bravery and tactical skill, were ill-prepared for the scale and intensity of the Soviet assault. Encirclement maneuvers executed with precision cut off Japanese units from reinforcements and supply lines, isolating them and reducing their ability to respond effectively. Tanks played a critical role in the counteroffensive. Soviet armored units advanced along flanks and through identified weak points, using mobility and firepower to disrupt Japanese formations. The Japanese, with limited anti-tank capabilities and lacking sufficient mechanized support, were forced to respond with infantry counterattacks under heavy fire, often with little effect. The combination of tanks, infantry, and artillery allowed the Soviets to maintain pressure across a wide front, gradually constricting Japanese positions and denying them opportunities to regroup. Coordination and timing were critical, and the Soviets executed each phase with careful precision, demonstrating superior operational planning. Air support, though limited, contributed to the effectiveness of the counteroffensive. Soviet aircraft conducted reconnaissance, ground attacks, and artillery spotting missions, providing commanders with valuable intelligence and disrupting Japanese movements. Japanese air units attempted to respond, but Soviet control of the skies in key sectors allowed for uninterrupted observation and close coordination with ground forces. The integration of air power, while not decisive alone, enhanced the efficiency and effectiveness of the broader offensive operations. The human cost of the counteroffensive was severe. Intense combat, exposure to artillery, and exhaustion from continuous operations took a toll on both sides. Japanese soldiers faced encirclement, dwindling supplies, and relentless pressure, leading to declining morale and increasing casualties. Soviet troops, though better coordinated and supported, also endured harsh conditions, fatigue, and the stresses of sustained offensive operations. The high stakes of the counteroffensive underscored the determination of both sides and the intensity of the battle for control over Khalkhin Gol. By mid-August, the Soviet counteroffensive had achieved its objectives. Japanese forces were largely contained, with significant units encircled and neutralized. The operation demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated combined arms tactics, superior planning, and flexibility in command. Soviet control of key terrain and decisive maneuvering had shifted the balance of power on the battlefield. The success of the counteroffensive marked a turning point in the Khalkhin Gol campaign, highlighting the vulnerabilities of Japanese tactics when confronted with well-prepared, integrated opposition, and setting the stage for the Japanese withdrawal that would follow in the coming weeks. By late August 1939, the Japanese forces along the Khalkhin Gol River were forced into a strategic withdrawal. After weeks of relentless Soviet counteroffensives, coordinated artillery strikes, and armored assaults, the Japanese units had suffered significant losses in manpower, equipment, and morale. The encirclement of key formations and the disruption of supply lines had left commanders with little choice but to retreat in order to preserve the remnants of their forces. The withdrawal was executed under difficult conditions, as troops navigated the open steppes under constant threat of Soviet pursuit and artillery fire, making it one of the most challenging operational maneuvers of the campaign. The human and material cost of the conflict became starkly evident during the retreat. Japanese units abandoned vehicles, artillery, and supplies to maintain mobility, while soldiers struggled with exhaustion, injuries, and heat. Many units were forced to leave behind the dead and wounded, a grim testament to the intensity of the fighting. Morale had plummeted, and the psychological impact of being decisively repelled by Soviet forces weighed heavily on both troops and commanders. Despite these hardships, discipline among remaining units prevented total collapse, allowing a portion of the Japanese army to withdraw in an organized manner, avoiding complete annihilation. On the Soviet side, the victory at Khalkhin Gol was the result of careful planning, coordination, and effective execution of combined arms tactics. Soviet forces successfully exploited Japanese weaknesses, particularly in mobility, logistics, and armored support, achieving encirclement and attrition of enemy formations. The integration of infantry, artillery, and tanks, supported by reconnaissance and limited air power, demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated operations and provided valuable experience for future campaigns. Soviet casualties were significant, yet the operation highlighted the Red Army's growing competence and the leadership capabilities of Georgy Zhukov, whose planning and adaptability had been decisive in securing victory. Politically, the aftermath of Khalkhin Gol had profound consequences. For Japan, the defeat challenged the prevailing confidence of the Kwantung Army and prompted reassessment of strategic priorities. Japanese leaders concluded that northern expansion into Soviet territory carried unacceptable risks, influencing a shift towards southern expansion and the eventual confrontation with Western powers in Southeast Asia. The battle also exposed the limitations of Japanese tactical doctrine, particularly in terms of coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery, and highlighted the importance of intelligence, logistics, and flexibility in modern warfare. For the Soviet Union, the victory reinforced the importance of preparedness, fortification, and integration of combined arms tactics. It secured the eastern frontier, strengthened the Soviet-Mongolian alliance, and demonstrated that the Red Army could effectively repel an aggressive, experienced adversary. The battle boosted morale within the military and provided valuable lessons that would inform the development of operational and strategic doctrines in the coming years. The legacy of the Japanese withdrawal extended beyond immediate military outcomes. It marked a decisive end to large-scale hostilities along the Khalkhin Gol and effectively stabilized the contested border. The retreat also had long-term implications for Japanese-Soviet relations, contributing to the neutrality pact signed between the two nations in 1941, which allowed Japan to focus on southern expansion without the immediate threat of Soviet intervention. The strategic consequences of the withdrawal reshaped regional calculations and underscored the significance of Khalkhin Gol as a decisive and influential campaign. By the end of August 1939, the battlefield was firmly under Soviet control. The Japanese withdrawal, though orderly, symbolized the limits of their ambitions in the region and the effectiveness of well-coordinated defensive and offensive operations. The campaign had tested the endurance, strategy, and adaptability of both sides, leaving a lasting mark on military history and influencing the planning and conduct of future conflicts in East Asia. The strategic consequences of the battles of Khalkhin Gol extended far beyond the immediate outcome on the Mongolian steppes. For the Japanese, the defeat was a sobering reminder of the limits of their military capabilities when facing a well-prepared and coordinated adversary. The loss forced Japanese military planners to reconsider their expansionist strategies, effectively ending serious contemplation of a northern campaign against the Soviet Union. Instead, Japan shifted focus towards southern expansion into China, Southeast Asia, and ultimately the Pacific, where resources and weaker opposition offered more promising opportunities. The experience at Khalkhin Gol highlighted critical weaknesses in Japanese doctrine, particularly the lack of integrated combined arms operations, insufficient armor support, and underestimation of the enemy's capacity for rapid, organized counteroffensives. For the Soviet Union, the victory at Khalkhin Gol validated reforms in military organization, planning, and command execution. Georgy Zhukov's leadership demonstrated the effectiveness of careful preparation, coordination, and flexibility in operations involving large-scale mechanized and infantry forces. The success boosted the morale and confidence of the Red Army, proving that even a battle against a skilled, aggressive opponent could be decisively won through disciplined tactics and operational planning. Lessons learned in maneuver warfare, combined arms coordination, and the integration of reconnaissance and artillery would influence Soviet doctrine in subsequent conflicts, including the immense battles on the Eastern Front during World War II. The outcome of Khalkhin Gol also affected international perceptions. The battle demonstrated that the Soviet Union was capable of defending its eastern frontier and projecting power effectively, which influenced Japanese calculations in both diplomacy and military strategy. Adolf Hitler took note of the engagement, recognizing that Japan, having suffered a defeat against Soviet forces, was unlikely to join a northern offensive against the USSR. This perception shaped German strategic planning, contributing indirectly to the timing and execution of Operation Barbarossa in 1941. The battle's broader implications emphasized how regional conflicts could have ripple effects on global military and political calculations. Khalkhin Gol also provided critical insights into the evolving nature of modern warfare. The conflict showcased the importance of combined arms tactics, mobility, logistics, and intelligence, reinforcing that success in battle required more than individual bravery or training. The Soviet emphasis on artillery coordination, mechanized support, and well-timed counteroffensives contrasted sharply with the Japanese reliance on infantry aggression and tactical initiative, illustrating the consequences of doctrinal shortcomings. Both sides emerged from the campaign with lessons that would inform their planning, training, and equipment development for years to come. The battle left a lasting imprint on military leadership as well. Georgy Zhukov, elevated by his performance at Khalkhin Gol, gained recognition for his operational skill and decisiveness, setting the stage for his later prominence in the defense of the Soviet Union during World War II. Japanese commanders faced scrutiny and reassessment, leading to incremental doctrinal adjustments and a heightened awareness of the need for coordination and support in large-scale operations. Ultimately, the battles of Khalkhin Gol reshaped strategic priorities across East Asia. The Soviet Union secured its eastern borders and strengthened its regional position, while Japan redirected its ambitions southward. The campaign exemplified the impact of tactical innovation, operational discipline, and strategic foresight, leaving enduring lessons on the interconnection between battlefield outcomes and broader geopolitical developments. The consequences of Khalkhin Gol echoed far beyond the steppes of Mongolia, influencing military thinking, national strategies, and the unfolding course of global conflict in the years that followed. The battles of Khalkhin Gol, though often overshadowed by the larger conflicts of World War II, occupy a significant place in military history and historical analysis. For decades, scholars have examined the campaign to understand its tactical, operational, and strategic lessons. The battle demonstrated the evolution of modern warfare in the late 1930s, highlighting the effectiveness of combined arms operations, the importance of logistics, and the decisive impact of leadership and planning. Historians note that the conflict was not simply a border skirmish, but a carefully fought campaign that tested the doctrines and capabilities of both Japanese and Soviet forces in a real combat environment. In Russia, Khalkhin Gol is remembered as a formative moment for the Red Army. The campaign provided practical experience in coordinating infantry, artillery, and armored units, and showcased the talents of commanders like Georgy Zhukov. His leadership, marked by meticulous planning and flexible execution, became a model for subsequent Soviet operations during the Second World War. The battle reinforced the value of preparation, intelligence, and adaptability, lessons that would prove critical in the enormous engagements on the Eastern Front. Soviet narratives emphasized the discipline, resilience, and tactical ingenuity displayed by their forces, framing the campaign as an early example of Soviet military professionalism in the modern era. In Japan, the battle is often viewed through the lens of strategic recalibration. Although the Kwantung Army demonstrated courage and tactical skill, the defeat underscored the limitations of Japanese operational doctrine when confronted with a well-prepared, combined arms opponent. Historians point to Khalkhin Gol as a turning point that influenced Japan's strategic focus, prompting a shift away from northern expansion toward the resource-rich territories of Southeast Asia. The campaign revealed gaps in coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery, and exposed weaknesses in supply and reconnaissance planning. While the battle was a setback, Japanese analyses contributed to later doctrinal refinements and highlighted the critical importance of intelligence, flexibility, and combined arms integration. Mongolia, as the setting for the conflict, also retains historical significance. The battle affirmed the value of Soviet-Mongolian cooperation and the strategic importance of the region in controlling access to Manchuria and the surrounding territories. Contemporary accounts emphasize the harsh conditions faced by soldiers and the logistical challenges imposed by the steppe environment, illustrating how terrain and climate can profoundly shape military operations. The engagement provided both nations with lessons in supply management, mobility, and adaptability under extreme conditions. Modern historians debate aspects of Khalkhin Gol, including casualty figures, operational decisions, and the relative importance of individual commanders. Despite differences in interpretation, there is consensus that the battle had far-reaching consequences for military strategy, regional politics, and the development of doctrines that would shape World War II. The campaign stands as a case study in the effective use of combined arms tactics, the necessity of flexible leadership, and the critical role of logistics and planning in modern warfare. Ultimately, Khalkhin Gol's legacy lies not only in its immediate outcomes, but in the broader lessons it offered to nations, military thinkers, and historians. It demonstrated how even remote engagements could influence the course of regional strategy, affect global perceptions, and alter the trajectory of national ambitions. The battle's significance endures, reminding us that understanding history requires attention not only to large-scale wars, but also to the pivotal, often overlooked conflicts that shape military, political, and strategic thinking for generations. The battles of Khalkhin Gol remain a remarkable testament to strategy, endurance, and the complexities of modern warfare. Though often overshadowed by the larger conflicts of World War II, this campaign demonstrated the profound impact that well-executed planning, combined arms tactics, and disciplined leadership can have on the outcome of a battle. The confrontation tested the limits of Japanese ambition and highlighted the effectiveness of Soviet operational innovation, revealing critical lessons in logistics, reconnaissance, and coordination that would shape future military thinking. Beyond the tactical and operational achievements, Khalkhin Gol had lasting strategic consequences. For Japan, the defeat prompted a re-evaluation of expansionist priorities, steering focus southward and away from the Soviet Union. For the Soviets, the victory secured the eastern frontier, strengthened alliances with Mongolia, and provided invaluable experience for commanders like Georgy Zhukov, whose leadership would influence the broader course of World War II. The human dimension of the battle, The courage, endurance, and sacrifices of the soldiers on both sides remains a defining element of its legacy. Khalkhin Gol serves as a reminder that even in remote regions, the outcome of conflict can reshape national strategies, alter geopolitical calculations, and leave enduring lessons in military history. Its significance endures as a symbol of tactical brilliance, resilience, and the far-reaching consequences of war,